everybody, it's Erin again. I just got, well, I didn't just get back. I went to a Tim Holtz class this past summer, and I've been sitting with this little bag waiting to do my video. I keep needing to do it. And it was an amazing class. He actually ran 2 separate classes, and it was a store that was based out of Texas. It's called the Crafty Scrapper. It's in Waxahachie, Texas, which is just a little bit south of Dallas, so it's not too far. So from where I am in Austin, it took us about 2.5 hours. A friend and I went. So that way we could share the gas money, and I had somebody in the car with me. So when we got there, and I'll show you what the class was that we made here in a second. So when we got there, one of the first things that we had on our desk was the ideology apron, and everybody could go up and get Tim to sign it. So I got Tim's signature on my fun little apron. Yippee! So I asked at the beginning of the class if I could do some little videos of the class, and just so we could kind of see what his class would be like for those of you who've never been to one before. And he said, sure, as long as you don't video the whole class, which I didn't. And so that video is coming. It's some little snippets that are going to be here and there about what a class of his is like. They had a really cool little system that was in the class. So as we were going through, and I'm going to show you the things that we got in the class, and then I'm going to show you some of the products I picked up. So as he was going through all of his class, we all had this little number. And I think I was like 14 or something. I don't remember. It's been a little while. And if there was a product that they were showing you how to use while we were doing the class, you could hold up your little number and they would write it down. And then at the end of the day, you could go pick it up. And so what I picked up was all of this fun stuff. And I'm going to come back. This is brand new, and I'm going to show at the end of the video, and we're going to kind of do a little bit of a demo. Oh, so I was number 24. They wrote it on here. I knew it was close to something like that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do an example of what all these are like and how they're all different or all similar. And he also, in the other video, explained a little difference between all of these as well. So, but I'm going to do a little demo here. All right, so the class that I took is called Art Assemblage. And in the Art Assemblage class, we got a frame, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. And then we got to play with a lot of his fun things. So his crayons that he has, we got to play with some of his inks that he has, and some of the other fun things that he has through Ranger. The main part of the kit that we got, and I'm not done, this was just the very early stages of the kit, is we got to start working and playing with some of the fun layers and starting to work. And he gave us some foils, and I've actually kind of let these just sit here. And you can use these foils more often than not. And I'm going to do another video of me finishing this because I did not get a chance to finish it. And the whole point is to kind of have fun. And as you can see, you create a background texture. And I kind of go through in some of the video and explain what we had already done. But you create a background texture and then you start layering on. And so we also got the little wooden pieces. We got to pick out some ephemera that he had at the deck table. It was all of his relatives cards, which is pretty card. So we got the actual whole alphabet of the wooden pieces, which are right here, and then we could pick out what we wanted, and he showed us how to kind of paint them and stuff. And then we also, everybody got a stencil. This was ours to keep, and this was very specific for the class. You can't buy this online, you can't find this anywhere else, so this was a purely online, or by going to the class only stencil. Sorry, my daughter's having fun playing with a brush. We got our own pack of ephemera, which is right here. And I threw everything inside this little, so this was the stencil. So one of the things that he actually said to us is that as he went through and he would find, like, any of the pictures that you see in his stuff came from real pictures that he found at garage sales or at flea markets. Any of these old pieces like this, they were real, and he's just reproduced them. All these old tags, numbers, they aren't just recreated on, online. These are purely, they found these pieces and then they just recreated them for the masses. Let's see, here's the bottom of the card or of this thing. So it's very cool to know that it's not just coming from nowhere. Like, this came from inside of a book, he said. These pieces came from in a book or on the front of a postcard or something along those lines. So they're inside magazines that he found or reproduced from something. So this one actually has a copyright down here from a place in Chicago. So a lot of these businesses that may have had them to begin with, they don't exist anymore. And so you find them and then you can reproduce them because the companies can't go against you. Old mail letters. So these are the real thing, just scaled down for us to play with and to put on our things. But, if you have your own, there's nothing to say that you can't, add a little bit of something to it and use it on your own. Nice way of using some of those old vintage things that maybe your grandparents have or you have, or you go to a flea market and find it yourself. It's kind of fun. The one bonus to his stuff though is that he sized it down for you, so it's not this big giant piece, it's kind of small. So that's kind of cool. We also got a whole bunch of little bits and pieces to play with. So we got to play with a whole bunch of fun little, or he gave us a little baggie of fun embellishments to kind of play with. So here's some of his metals and of resin and, you know, just kind of others fun doodads here and there, some wood pieces. And then he also gave us some of the deco foils to play with Ranger, and he gave us, depending on where we were going with our frame, color scheme was either silver or gold. But because the color scheme I went with, I did both. So I got a little sampling of both. It's kind of fun. Let me throw those back in here. And then when the whole thing was said and done, so here's the fun frames, and these are the 4 that he did, and you can tell this is the one that's actually on here. This came with the class as well. So this is a little stand that is supposed to meant to fit with the frame that he gave us. And it's all in pieces, so let's see how this works. Kind of been wanting to put this thing together for a little while. And this was kind of a hidden surprise. The end of the class, he's like, oh, and by the way, we were like, yay! So this is pretty heavy. This is not like some light little aluminum nothing. This has got some heft to it. So I'm assuming this part goes in here. It's got some instructions, so I'm just trying to, bearing with me here. So here I'm thinking that I'm missing a piece, and no, he's smart. He actually put the screw into the bottom here, so you're not gonna miss it. Now we just gotta get it out. Pretty simple. Put this in and then just screw it back in place, and this is what's going to hold the pole to the stand. All right, so here is my stand. I know you really can't see, it's coming right up to the top of the camera, but this has got some weight to it. I mean, this is definitely like in the 3 to 4 pound range. This is not a light item by any way, shape, or form. The next thing that goes on here are the little clips. So one goes on the top and one goes on the bottom, and it has this little flywheel. Not flywheel, it's just a wing nut. That's what it's called. Can I see it? My daughter's over here playing with the other one. And you've got to do it so that when you put this on, you've got one bracket that's facing down and one that's facing up. And he says the beauty of this system is that this is not just meant to use for this particular frame. You could put anything you want in here, whatever piece of artwork or whatever frame you have, they all fit because you can adjust it. So, and you can change it out. It's not a permanent thing. This is not something that you get to use once and then it's a done deal. So here's how this looks. So you can adjust this, and let's just see how this looks. So all he said you have to do, and you can make this as high or as low as you want. So if you want this lower to the ground, see? And then it can stand. So as you can see, this has got a little bit of weight to it. See how it's standing there? So now you can put whatever you want. You could take a framed picture and stick it in this thing. You could have all kinds of fun. So it's just a fun way of actually showing off your artwork. And if you don't want to put it on a wall, this could be something that could go on a countertop. So pretty cool, but I still need to finish this. And part of the reason why I didn't finish it in class, number one, you're never given 100% amount of time to finish in class. But number two, when I found this card of the 3 little kids, I was thinking, well, why can't I just put my own kids and do my own vintage kids on there and have fun with it? So I didn't want to finish it for that reason, because I really wanted to come home and do my own thing with it and finish it my way and not feel rushed, because doing the base, it doesn't matter. You can make that as grungy and have fun with it as much as you want. It's when you finish it, the last little pieces and touches and what you put on there, that's what really makes a difference. Okay, so back to our mists and stuff. Now, these things he talked about in the class, and in the other video, like I said, you're gonna get to see all these fun things about him talking about them. And we did get to play with a few of them. And so he said, now this is one of the cool things I heard him talk about. When you get a product, unless you're going to use it every day and know you're going to go through in the next year to 6 months to a year, use up that jar, don't get a big container, because as soon as you start opening it and you break the seal and you start getting in and dipping down, you leave airspace, and the quality of the product and the texture of the product and what it's going to use for is going to dry up. So he said, you know, if you can avoid getting the bigger jars, the giant jars, go for the smaller ones. He said that's one of the reasons why he did this variety pack, because you're more than likely going to want to use a little bit of both. And in this way, it's not going to dry out on you and get funky, because you're probably not going to use all of it within a year. He goes, he personally only uses this size. So I was like, all right, well, that works for me. So in this container, we have different kinds. We have transparent gloss, we have transparent matte, and we have Opaque Matte. And let's see what the difference is. All right, so one of the first things that I'm going to show you guys that we played with is in the class we got to do texture paste, and we used the transparent matte. Now, texture paste is what it is. This is kind of like your paste that you're going to use if you're going to use with stencils, which is exactly what we used it for. You can use it for other things, but this is purely a stencil product. So it is not super duper thick. I'm going to show you what each of these look like individually. So this is a white. This is the transparent gloss. Here is the transparent matte. So if you think the difference between gloss and matte, gloss you're going to have a shiny texture, and matte is not going to have a shiny finished product. So here's this one. And the last one is the opaque matte. And we're going to test the difference between, and this one is a ton thicker. And this one's really, really thick. What we are going to do now is we're going to use tin stencil, and we're just going to layer it across and show you what the difference is between the three. And we're just going to kind of go through along the stencil here, and so that way you can see the difference between the three. I don't want to use too much because I only got little mini bottles, and I will end up using. Okay, so transparent gloss is going to go in the first one. Rest of my product back inside the jar. You see the other spatula here is my daughter helping. No, we're done with this one. We're just putting the extra back. Okay, now we're going to do the transparent matte. I'm going to label this on my paper here in a minute. And I did this on a colored sheet because I wanted to see the difference, how it show up on a colored paper versus just on white, because sometimes you can't see the color shining through. The last one, ready for the last one? Okay, so you want to help me get a little tiny bit. A little bit. There we go. And this one is the opaque matte, and this is a much, look at the difference in the texture on this. This is like almost like a super thick paste. So again, I'm just going to take a tiny bit. So they say they're all paste, but these ones are definitely a lot more creamy than this one. Look at the difference already. I'm really having to push it in. Okay, and before I forget, I'm going to label all these. So here's our three that we have. I'm going to draw a little arrow so I don't forget. And I'm going to let these just air dry. So we're going to come back a little bit and see how they've all done. All right, the next one that we're going to talk about are the mediums. Now, any of these Distress Collage Mediums, he used these like glue. He was even using it to glue, which it actually worked. I'm kind of surprised. You see how these two pieces, these are actually two different pieces of the frame. Well, it kind of worked. These two pieces are, we used the collage medium, and in class we were using the crazing the whole time. Vintage is going to have a vintage look to it. The matte is just going to have a matte finish and be transparent, so you're not going to see it. And then the crazing, this one's kind of different. It's like a piece of china, and when you look at an old piece of china and you flip it over, you look at the front side, it looks like it has a whole bunch of tiny little cracks and lines all running through it. It's smooth. It does not like it is actually cracked. It just, on the inside, it's kind of got this spidery looking feel to it. He goes, that's what I wanted. When he went to his chemist, he said, I don't want it to look like it's like the crackle paste and the crackle mediums and how you actually can see cracks and lines. He goes, yeah, I don't want it like that. I want it to look like porcelain that's got spidery pieces to it. So that's what the crazing does. And he goes, there's no rhyme or reason to why it does in one area or another. And I did use it on this particular, on here, and I'm trying to find an area where you can see it. Okay, it's right in here. I don't know if this is really gonna actually pick it up or not. It's so tiny. But you see how it looks like it's got cracks all through it? Right through there, it looks like it's got a ton of little tiny cracks, and it's almost, it's underneath. It's not the top. Like I can run my finger and I can't feel the cracks, but underneath the image is where it's cracked. And he goes, it's very random, and it's just going to do it over time as the whole thing dries. So there's more here, and the whole thing has been covered with crazing. That's the only glue that I've used to hold everything down on. But it really showed up well here. It showed up well here. It's like little pieces between my stenciling it showed up. There's some stuff up here. So it was very hit and miss about how it showed up. And it shows up better once you add another layer of color on top of it. So that's what we're going to play with. I'm going to go ahead and write matte. And here's crazing. I know this is horrible writing. And here's my vintage. So the vintage has a very, and we didn't get to play with these. This is the first time I got to play with these two ones. The vintage is a very dark, deep color to it. And it's gonna have a little bit of a color that goes onto it. And he said there's two things that you can use to apply. Number one, you can use a brush, and you can wipe the brush, you can use a foam piece, you can use whatever you want. Number two, the other thing he loves to use are these cheapy little spatulas. So it's one of the reasons why he likes the cheapy ones is because they're a lot more pliable, and when it comes to putting it into a stencil, it's much, much easier to actually get it into the nooks and crannies of the stencil. If you use a very flexible, and you know, the little dollar ones, like these little plastic guys here, versus the super expensive kind that you would get that are metal that you would use for painting. So for our purposes, go for the cheap stuff. So here is the crazing, and this is a clear. You're not going to see it. So whatever, and it's also going to kind of give you a layer. So you can put a layer of this down and it'll hold the color. So when you add another layer, they won't blend together. So this will kind of add as a buffer between your two layers of paint. And then we have just the matte finish. So this is just going to be your typical, you know, medium used to glue. It's a little bit of a different property than this one because this is going to do the porcelain thing. It applies very much the same way. So the look of them, obviously this one, it looks very different because it's got a color, it's got a tint to it, it's got this darkness to it. And then the other two, this one's gonna have that porcelain. This is gonna end up having the matte finish. All right, the last one, this is the last piece. Now, price points, these were $11.99 at the store and for all three. So this was $11.99 and this was $11.99. And this bicker jar was $7.99, so it's not too bad. Distress grit paste, and I talked a little bit about this in the other video from the class that we took. This is brand new, and when I went to the class, it was in the middle of the summer, and he says literally this store is the first store to have it because he was there that day. He was able to launch it with us at that moment. Everybody else had to wait a few more days before it would go live online. So this is a very, very new product. It just came out this past summer, and he said what I wanted, I didn't want anything that had like sand in it. He didn't want a sand paste. He wanted something completely different. He basically said, I want snow. And that's what this is. This is something a little different than what's out there. And he used it with a stencil. How it reacts to certain different objects, for instance, if you want to use it with mists versus paint versus, you know, other things, they're all going to react a little differently. And so he says, I didn't want a gritty texture, but I do want it to look gritty. And he says, I know that's kind of weird, but I want it to feel smooth. I want it to work like a modeling paste, but have a snow texture when it was done. So this is just something a little different than what's out there. It's not massively different. It's very It's nice, light, and fluffy. So let's take a look at all these up close. So here's the grit paste up close. And as you can tell, it has a kind of a fluffy, snow-like texture to it. And has something. This is the Opaque Matte. And as you can tell, it's already starting to kind of dry with a opaqueness, meaning it's not completely transparent. You can't fully see through. Here is the Transparent Matte. It's a matte, but it's transparent. Opaque, meaning that you can't see through. And then this is the gloss. So this is going to have a high sheen gloss, but they all took the stencil very, very well. Down here we have the Vintage, as you can see, and then here is the crazing, and we're going to start seeing what that's going to do. He says you can add as thick as you want with the crazing, but be careful if you do go too thick, it's not going to work as well. So he says just be careful with the thickness. If it feels like you've glopped it on, it's not going to do what it should do. And then here is the matte finish. So we're going to let all these air dry for a little bit just to kind of see what they're going to do. So I've let all of these dry overnight, and as you can tell, some of them you can't even tell that they're there. So right here is one of the texture pastes. This is the gloss, and here's the matte, and you really can't even see that they're there. But as the Opaque Matte, it shows no problem. Same here is the new grit paste. The Vintage you can see just fine, and then these two really just kind of hide into the paper. They're there, but you really can't see them. Let me see if I can bring them up close so you can see what they look like. So here is this is the grit paste. This is that new stuff he said looks like snow. You can see it does really kind of have that snow-like texture on it. Here is the Opaque Matte texture paste. So here's the transparent. Let me see if I can get an angle. So you can tell that it picked up the stencil. It's very, very opaque, and it does have a little bit of a shine, but not much. And then here's the glossy, and this one definitely is a lot glossier looking, and you know, from my texture. I'm trying to get this up close so you can see it. Really hard to see. So I'm going to put a color over that and see it. And then here are the two, collage mediums. Here's the collage mediums. And I can't even see them even in the naked eye. So we're going to add some color. All right, so since we're dealing with all kinds of Tim Holtz stuff, I figure I pull out my Tim Holtz stuff. I haven't used this in a while. And I was going for a color that's completely different than any color tone that's on the paper. So I picked out purple. Dusty Concord. So I'm going to ink up my brush. And let's go over these two first. So as you can tell, they are resisting. They act as a resist. There's a lot more texture going through. These are super easy to blend over. So it's kind of a fun way to add some detailed texture to your paper here. And you can see the stencil on there. It is raised. I mean, I can feel where I put my the stencil on there. And it's not picking up on this paper right here because it's a glossy paper already. So it's only picking up color on the paper behind, so the actual paper, because the tan part here is glossy. So you're not going to see it. Obviously, this is going to pick up the color. So notice this did not resist anything. So these two are resists. This one is not a resist. So it was white, but it's not any longer. These, on the other hand, are keeping the color that is still under from the paper. So if you had white under there, it would stay white wherever the stencil part was, wherever it stuck. The texture grit paste, same thing. It's going to change color. It's not going to stay the color of white once you add the color to it. It's going to transform. You could even add color to these. That's the cool part. The vintage, it's going to keep its hue of its vintage color, as you can see. So it's going to add kind of thing. You're going to see the color around it and wherever there's some splotches, but you're going to keep the nice kind of vintagey, kind of brownish color going on there. It's not going to resist it completely. And then you have the other two. Now remember, these ones all act as glue. So here's the crazing, and this one is starting to do that effect, especially where I put it on a little thicker. The thin parts don't do it as much. So go for the thicker sections, and that's where it starts really kind of doing its crazing effect. And the matte, it just resists it. Simple as that. And he used these as glue, basically. So for all the layers of the collaging that we have done on any projects that he likes to do, he doesn't pull out glue. He uses his just collage medium instead. That's his basis for glue. So let's take a look at these up close now. Okay, so again, here's our resist. Truthfully, I can see a little bit of a difference. This one has stayed a little more stark white, and this one has a little bit of a color in it still. So it's not super, let me get that better. So here's the glossy and here's the matte. And the glossy seems more stark white, whereas the matte definitely has more of a muted tone. And then this picked up the color. This is the opaque matte. This is what I would call your traditional texture paste. Here is the true grit, and colored over, which is just fine. Vintage, it just kept its brown, but you can see where I put the purple around it. And then here's the crazing. This is the new thing that goes along with it. Right in here. Get that nice and close. See that? See how it's got that porcelain look to it, how it's all kind of cracked and porcelated? That's what the effect has. It's very, very, very subtle. And then here is the matte medium, the matte collage. It just covered it over, and you're not going to see any of the color underneath. It's going to add a layer, kind of like a boundary to it. So those are fun things, kind of neat in differences in how they all work and kind of the fun things. Similar to some other products, I would say. This one is very unique. I've never seen this anywhere else. The grit paste, it's another texture paste that's out there. It's kind of cool. It's not super gritty. It's not super, light. It's what I would call like a step up from this, but not as much as a sand paste. The vintage is kind of cool if you want to add some really kind of grungy layers. And then the matte medium is the matte collage, is just your typical matte collage. So all good stuff. I will use these, definitely, not a problem. Thanks for stopping by and taking a look at all my fun goodies that I got from my class, where I took this class right here with Tim Holtz, my fun little stand you can see kind of off in the corner here, and all my little fun goodies. They weren't too badly priced either, so I mean, some people went really haywire on how much they spent, but I didn't overdo it. So thanks for stopping by. I'll see you again. Subscribe. Bye-bye.
Welcome to my 1500 giveaway. I'm giving away 4 different Brutus Monroe mini chalk ink sets to lucky winners who subscribe to my channel. All I need you to do is go to the video linked here, which is my Brutus Monroe Ink Lab. Go in the top corner and hit the I button. It'll take you directly to that video, and then just leave a comment that you would like to win. And if you're a new subscriber, please say that, or if you're a returning subscriber, well, let me know. That's it. Thanks so much. Bye.